Take the truck. You're done arguing. Then document which parcel you're towing from. You haven't verified the property line. I don't need you teaching me jurisdiction. The truck is in the restricted section. Then show me which sign proves it. You keep acting like you know something. I know the markings are unclear. Did you call somebody?
No, I asked nobody to come.
That painted line is the boundary. Then why does that marker disagree?
Take the truck. Officer Bradley Knox said it without looking at Marcus Hale, as if the decision had already become too ordinary to deserve another conversation. 6 feet away, Marcus stood on sun-heated asphalt with both hands visible at his sides, while the tow operator studied the rear of his pickup. The truck was old enough to show its years around the wheel wells, but the paint was clean, the tires were maintained, and nothing about it suggested abandonment. Marcus watched the operator prepare to move closer. "Officer, you have not verified the property line." Knox finally turned toward him. "I do not need you teaching me jurisdiction." His voice carried across the nearly empty parking area between the Veterans Resource Center and the military installation beyond the fence. Officer Tyler Grant stood beside the patrol vehicle with a tablet in one hand. He had been quiet for the last several minutes. Now his eyes moved from the screen to a faded white line crossing the pavement beneath the edge of Marcus's truck. Marcus noticed. Knox did too. "Hook it up," Knox said. The tow operator hesitated. "You are confirming authorization?" "I just did." Marcus drew one slow breath. Hot wind moved across the lot, carrying dust over the asphalt. Beyond the security fence, an American flag shifted against the bright afternoon sky. Marcus looked down at the white line. Most drivers would have mistaken it for an old parking marker. He had looked at it differently from the beginning. Boundaries mattered. They determined where one authority stopped and another began. "Before you move it," Marcus said, "document who authorized the tow from this parcel." Knox stepped closer, stopping several feet away. "You have been told what is happening." "Yes." "Then stop interfering." Marcus glanced toward the tow operator, who had not touched the truck yet. "I am standing 6 feet away." Grant lowered his tablet slightly. Knox looked at him. "Something wrong." Grant paused. "The parcel map is loading." "We do not need the map." Marcus turned his eyes toward Knox. "Then verifying it should change nothing." For the first time, Knox's expression tightened. "You think because you were in the military, you get to decide how this works?" Marcus said nothing for a moment. He had never mentioned his service to Knox. The Veterans Center behind him, the small service decal on the truck, or something in the paperwork might have told the officer enough to make the assumption. Marcus did not correct him. His military history was not the point. His truck could have belonged to a teacher, a mechanic, a college student, or anyone else. The boundary would still be the boundary. "My background does not change the property line," Marcus said. Knox gave a short, humorless laugh. "Exactly. So step back and let us work." Marcus looked down again. The faded stripe disappeared beneath the truck and reappeared near the front tire. 20 yards away stood 2 signs facing slightly different directions. One carried county parking language. The other referenced installation access. Neither could settle what Knox was treating as settled. The tow operator shifted his weight. "Officer, I would rather have the parcel confirmed." Knox's jaw tightened. "You have my authorization." Grant looked at his tablet again. "Bradley." Knox turned. "What?" Grant enlarged something on the screen. "This boundary is not displaying cleanly." The air seemed to change. Marcus did not smile. He did not say he had warned them. He simply waited. Knox walked toward Grant, looked briefly at the tablet, then shook his head. "The truck is in the restricted section. The map is showing 2 layers, Grant said. "Then refresh it." Marcus watched Knox turn back toward the tow operator. "Proceed." A low mechanical sound came from the tow truck as the operator prepared the equipment. Marcus's fingers curled once, then relaxed. He stayed where he was. "Officer Knox," he said, "if you are certain, put the parcel number in the tow record before the truck moves." Knox stared at him. Grant stopped touching the tablet. Even the tow operator looked up. Then, from the road beyond the far end of the lot, 2 dark vehicles turned toward the entrance. Their markings became visible as they approached. Military police. Knox followed Marcus's gaze. The confidence on his face did not disappear, but something inside it changed. The first vehicle slowed near the faded white line. Marcus remained motionless as the second pulled in behind it. Nobody in the parking lot knew yet why they had arrived. Before we continue, if you enjoy powerful stories that reveal the strength of the human spirit and the choices that shape our lives, subscribe to Narralight. Every story has a lesson, every choice has a consequence, and sometimes the smallest moment changes everything. Now, let's see what happens next. 32 minutes earlier, Marcus Hale had pulled into the parking area expecting to stay less than an hour. The Veterans Resource Center sat near the edge of the military installation, a low brick building used for benefits appointments, employment counseling, and community support. Marcus had driven there to deliver paperwork for a housing workshop he volunteered with twice each month. His pickup rolled slowly past the first row of spaces while he searched for visitor parking. He noticed the signs before choosing a spot. One sign identified visitor parking for the resource center. About 30 feet farther down, another warned that parking beyond a designated boundary was restricted under installation rules. The problem was the boundary itself. Fresh yellow markings divided several spaces, while an older white line crossed the asphalt at an angle and disappeared beneath years of patchwork. Marcus stopped the truck, studied both signs through the windshield, then eased into a space that appeared to remain on the visitor's side. He shut off the engine, but did not immediately open the door. Years of working around controlled areas had taught him a simple habit. When signs and lines disagreed, look twice. Marcus stepped out, walked several feet toward the nearest sign, and checked the pavement again. His truck sat beside the faded white line, not obviously beyond it. A smaller county parking notice stood near the entrance to the lot. Nothing indicated that visitor vehicles in his row required a special permit. Marcus returned to the truck, locked it, and walked inside. His appointment took 23 minutes. When he came back through the glass doors, afternoon heat had settled over the lot, making the distant pavement shimmer. Marcus saw the patrol vehicle before he saw the officers. It was parked behind his pickup at an angle. Officer Bradley Knox stood near the driver's side of the truck, looking through the windshield without touching anything. Officer Tyler Grant was several feet away, entering information into a tablet. Marcus slowed but kept walking normally. "Afternoon," he said. Knox turned. His eyes moved over Marcus, then toward the resource center behind him. "This your truck?" "Yes." "It is parked in a restricted area." Marcus looked toward the signs. "I checked before I went inside. This row is marked for visitors." Knox pointed toward the faded line. "Restricted side starts there." Marcus followed his finger. "Which side of the line?" Knox gave him a brief look. "The side your truck is on." Marcus studied the pavement again. The answer sounded certain, but the markings did not. "Can you show me which sign establishes that?" Knox's expression changed slightly. "I just explained it. I understand what you said. I am asking because the visitor sign appears to cover this row." Grant looked up from the tablet. Knox glanced toward him, then back at Marcus. "License and registration." Marcus nodded. "Registration is in the glove compartment. My license is in my wallet." He waited. "May I open the truck?" Knox gestured toward it. "Go ahead." Marcus retrieved the registration slowly, closed the door, and handed both documents over. Knox examined them. His eyes paused on Marcus's identification, then moved toward a small service decal near the lower corner of the windshield. "Veteran?" he asked. "Yes." "Then you should understand restricted areas." Marcus held his gaze. "I understand why boundaries need to be clear." Knox handed the license to Grant. "Run it." Grant returned to the tablet. Marcus looked again at the two signs, then at the white line beneath the edge of his truck. "If I am on the wrong side, I will move it." Knox shook his head. "You are not moving anything yet." Marcus looked back at him. "Why not?" "Because I am determining what happens next." A dry gust pushed dust across the pavement between them. Marcus heard traffic beyond the installation fence and the faint metallic movement of the flagpole rope nearby. Grant studied the tablet longer than Marcus expected. "Everything is current," Grant said. Knox barely acknowledged him. Marcus gestured toward his truck without stepping closer. "There is no citation on the windshield, and I am standing here with the keys. If the issue is parking, I can correct it now." Knox looked toward the faded boundary, then toward Marcus. "That decision is not yours anymore." He reached for the radio clipped near his shoulder. Marcus remained still as Knox requested a tow truck. Knox finished the tow request and lowered his radio as if the matter had been settled by the act of making the call. Marcus remained beside the visitor walkway, watching heat shimmer above the hood of his pickup. "You are towing it instead of letting me move it?" he asked. Knox slipped Marcus's registration beneath the edge of his notepad. "The vehicle is in a restricted area." "I heard you. I am asking why towing is necessary when the owner is standing here with the keys." Knox looked at him for a long second. "Because you do not get to decide the remedy." Marcus felt the familiar pressure of a conversation becoming less about the original problem and more about who was allowed to question it. He kept his voice level. "Then I would like the restriction identified before the truck is removed." Knox pointed toward the faded white line. "There." Marcus looked down. The line crossed behind one tire, vanished beneath dark pavement repairs, and reappeared several yards away at an angle that did not match the newer parking spaces. "That shows a line," Marcus said. "It does not tell me which authority painted it or what it separates." Knox gave a small, impatient smile. "You always argue this much over parking?" Marcus let the question pass. Grant stood beside the patrol vehicle, scrolling through information on his tablet. "Tyler," Knox called. "Anything else on him?" Grant looked up. "No. License is valid. Registration is current." "That is not what I asked." Grant paused. "Nothing else showing." Marcus heard the exchange, but did not react. He had provided every document requested. He had offered to move the truck. Still, Knox's attention remained fixed on finding a reason the situation should continue. Marcus looked toward the visitor sign. "Officer Knox, would you check the parcel before the tow arrives?" Knox folded his arms. "I know where I am standing. That is not the same as knowing where the boundary runs." The words were calm, but Knox's face tightened. "You need to stop trying to manage this stop." Marcus glanced around the open lot. "I am not managing anything. I am asking what rule applies." Knox stepped closer, leaving several feet between them. "The rule is that vehicles do not park in restricted areas." "Agreed. Then we are finished. Not if we disagree about whether this space is restricted." Grant looked down at the tablet again. His thumb moved across the screen. Marcus noticed the hesitation. "Can your map show the parcel?" he asked Grant. Knox answered instead. "Do not involve my partner." Marcus turned back to Knox. He is holding the map. For a moment, only the flagpole rope clicking lightly against metal broke the silence. Grant cleared his throat. "The county layer shows the visitor lot, but the installation layer is not lining up cleanly." Knox looked toward him. "It is an old map." "Could be. So use the posted signs." Marcus gestured toward the two signs without moving from his position. "They point in different directions." Knox stared at him. "You really think you know this property better than I do?" "No." Marcus shook his head. "That is why I am asking for verification." The answer seemed to irritate Knox more than an argument would have. A low diesel engine became audible from the road. Marcus turned his head and saw a tow truck approaching the parking entrance. Grant looked from the arriving truck to his tablet. "Bradley, maybe we should confirm this before they hook anything up." Knox's eyes narrowed. "There is nothing to confirm." The tow truck entered the lot and slowed beside Marcus's pickup. The operator lowered his window and looked toward Knox for direction. Knox pointed at the truck. "That one." Marcus stayed where he was. The operator parked and stepped out, studying the pavement before looking at Marcus. "Owner?" "Yes." "You have the keys?" "Yes." The operator looked at Knox. "He can move it." Knox answered immediately. "No." Marcus watched Grant's expression change. The operator glanced at the faded white line beneath the pickup, then at the conflicting signs. "What is the tow authority?" he asked. Knox reached for his notepad. "Restricted parking." The operator waited. "County property?" Knox looked toward Marcus before answering. "Yes." Grant's eyes dropped instantly to the tablet. Marcus saw it. Something on that screen had just made Knox's certainty harder to defend. The tow operator kept his attention on Knox, waiting for the answer to become more specific. Knox tapped his notepad with one finger. "County restricted parking. That is your authorization." Grant remained beside the patrol vehicle, staring at the tablet. Marcus noticed that he had stopped scrolling. "Tyler," Knox said, "is there a problem?" Grant raised his eyes. "The county parcel layer ends somewhere near this row." Knox looked toward the faded white line. "Near is not a boundary." "That is exactly what I have been saying," Marcus replied. Knox turned toward him. "I was not asking you." Marcus nodded once and became silent. The tow operator walked several feet toward the rear of the pickup, but stopped before preparing anything. "I need the location recorded correctly," he said. If this is not county property, I need to know before I move it. Knox exhaled through his nose. It is county property. Grant stepped closer with the tablet. The installation layer overlaps this section. Knox glanced at the screen for barely a second. Mapping error. Maybe, Grant said. But the visitor layer also reaches past the truck. Marcus watched Knox's face. Certainty had become effort now. Each new question required him to defend a conclusion he could have verified minutes earlier. Marcus looked toward the two signs. The older one near the fence had weathered edges and faded lettering. The newer visitor sign stood closer to the resource center. Between them, the white line crossed the asphalt like a sentence whose ending had been erased. Officer Knox, Marcus said, I am still willing to move the truck if someone confirms this space is restricted. Knox faced him. You are not getting back into the vehicle. Then let the tow operator wait while you confirm the parcel. We are done debating. Marcus held his gaze. I am not debating whether you have authority. I am asking where that authority applies. Grant looked down again. The tow operator shifted his gloves from one hand to the other. Nobody moved toward the pickup. Knox pointed toward the tow truck. Get it ready. The operator hesitated. I can position the truck, but I am not moving his vehicle until the authorization is clear on my paperwork. Knox's expression hardened. You were called for a tow. Yes, sir. I was also called to the edge of federal property. Grant turned the tablet slightly toward Knox. Bradley, look at this. Knox did not. I already looked. Not at this layer. A thin breeze moved across the lot. Marcus could smell warm asphalt and dry grass from beyond the fence. He kept his hands relaxed at his sides. Grant enlarged the map. The parcel identification changes right here. Knox finally stepped toward him. Where? Grant pointed at the screen. That is the problem. The digital line and the painted line do not match. Knox studied it for several seconds. Marcus expected him to call dispatch, check the parcel number, or simply pause the tow. Instead, Knox handed Marcus's registration back to Grant. The posted restriction controls. Marcus looked toward the signs. Which posted restriction? Knox turned sharply. You have asked that enough. And nobody has answered it. Knox walked toward Marcus's pickup and stopped near the faded stripe. This truck is on the restricted side. Marcus remained 6 feet away. Then identify this line in the tow record. Knox looked down at the paint beneath his shoes. Grant watched him. The operator watched him. For the first time, Knox seemed aware that everyone was waiting for the same thing. You want paperwork? He asked Marcus. I want the location documented before my property is moved. Fine. Knox pulled out his pen. We will document it. He looked toward the tow operator. Proceed. The operator returned toward his equipment, moving slowly. Grant lowered his voice. Bradley, I think we should call installation security. Knox shook his head. For a parking tow? For the boundary. No. Grant stared at the map. If that line is wrong, we are making this worse. Knox closed his notepad. The line is not wrong. Marcus looked toward the pavement, then toward Knox. How do you know? Knox gave him a cold stare. Because I know this lot. Marcus waited a beat. Knowing the lot is not the same as verifying the boundary. Knox pointed toward the visitor walkway. Step farther back. Marcus calmly moved another 2 feet away. The tow operator glanced at him, then at Knox. Grant remained focused on the conflicting map. A mechanical hum came from the tow truck as its equipment shifted into position. Marcus watched the faded white line disappear beneath his pickup. He could have shouted. He could have made the moment about pride. Instead, he spoke quietly. Before you move it, document who authorized removal from this parcel. The operator stopped. Knox's voice came immediately. I authorized it. Marcus looked directly at him. From which parcel? Grant slowly raised his eyes from the tablet. Knox did not answer. Before we continue, if you enjoy inspiring stories about courage, second chances, and people who choose kindness when it matters most, subscribe to Narralight. Our stories remind us that one decision, one voice, or one act of compassion can change a life forever. Now, let's see what happened next. Knox held Marcus's gaze for a moment, then turned toward the tow operator as though the unanswered question had never been asked. Finish setting up. The operator remained beside his equipment. I still need the property information for the ticket. Knox opened his notepad again. Put down county restricted parking. Parcel number? Knox's pen stopped. Grant shifted the tablet in his hands. Bradley, let me confirm it. Knox looked at him. You already said the layers are not matching. That is why I want to confirm it. And I am telling you where the boundary is. Grant did not answer. Marcus stood several feet away, feeling heat rise through the soles of his shoes. The simplest solution remained exactly where it had been 20 minutes earlier: verify the line. Yet every minute that passed seemed to make Knox more committed to avoiding that simple act. Marcus looked toward the operator. I am not asking you to take my side. The operator met his eyes. I know. I am asking you to write down who authorized the removal and from what property. Knox stepped between the conversation. He does not need instructions from you. Marcus kept his voice even. Then give him the information. Knox pointed toward the visitor walkway. Stay back. Marcus did not argue. He moved another step away, increasing the distance between himself and the pickup. Grant watched him comply. Bradley, Grant said quietly, he is not interfering. Knox turned. Nobody said he was. Grant glanced toward the tow truck. Then why not let him move it while we check the boundary? Knox's expression hardened. Because the tow has already been ordered. We can cancel a tow. We are not canceling it. The operator looked from one officer to the other. Marcus could see the discomfort spreading through the scene, not as panic, but as uncertainty nobody wanted to own. Knox had started with certainty. Now the map was uncertain, the signs conflicted, the operator wanted documentation, and his own partner was asking him to pause. Still, Knox pressed forward. The operator finally moved toward the rear of the pickup and crouched briefly to inspect the clearance around the truck. Marcus watched without approaching. Inside the cab, sunlight reflected from the windshield onto a small service keepsake resting near the dashboard. Marcus's eyes stayed there for a second. He remembered years when a line on a map could determine which unit had responsibility, which radio frequency mattered, and whose authorization was required. Nobody serious treated an uncertain boundary as an insult. They verified it. Officer Knox, Marcus said. Knox turned with visible impatience. What now? One last request. Call whoever controls the installation side and confirm the property line. Knox shook his head. No. Why? Because I do not need permission from military police to enforce county parking rules. Marcus nodded slightly. Not on county property. Grant looked at Knox. The tow operator stopped again. Marcus continued, still calm. That is the question. Knox stepped toward him, leaving several feet between them. You keep acting like you know something we do not. I know the markings are unclear. You think your military background makes you an expert on jurisdiction? No. Marcus looked down at the faded stripe. It taught me not to guess about boundaries. Grant's eyes returned to the tablet. Knox gave a short laugh. This is a parking lot, not an operations map. Marcus said nothing. The wind lifted a thin trail of dust across the white paint. Grant suddenly enlarged the map again. Wait. Knox looked over. What? Grant moved closer, turning the screen so both could see it. There is a second parcel identifier under the installation layer. Knox stared at the tablet. That does not mean anything. It means this section may not be recorded the way we thought. Knox's jaw tightened. May not. Correct. Grant looked directly at him. Which means we should verify it. For several seconds, Knox said nothing. Then the tow operator stood and removed his gloves. I am waiting until somebody gives me a parcel number. Knox looked at him in disbelief. You have authorization. I have a verbal tow request. I do not have a clear property location. Marcus remained silent. This was no longer his argument to make. Knox looked from the operator to Grant, then toward the pickup. His frustration sharpened. Nobody touches anything until I say so. Grant nodded. Fine. Then let us make the call. Knox stared at the faded white line beneath the truck. Before he could answer, a radio transmission broke through the quiet from Grant's shoulder microphone. Grant listened, then looked toward the road. Installation security is heading this way. Knox turned sharply. Who called them? Grant shook his head. Not me. Marcus looked toward the entrance. In the distance, two dark vehicles were approaching the lot. The two vehicles approached without sirens, moving at an ordinary speed that somehow made their arrival feel more serious. Marcus watched them turn into the parking area while Grant lowered his radio. Knox remained beside the pickup, his notepad still open in one hand. The tow operator had stepped away from his equipment entirely. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Wind moved across the asphalt and pushed another ribbon of dust over the faded white line beneath Marcus's truck. Marcus looked down at it. Years earlier, boundaries had been something he learned never to treat casually. A line could separate responsibilities, procedures, and authorities. Sometimes it was painted clearly. Sometimes it existed only on a map. Either way, guessing was never the same as knowing. The first vehicle slowed near the entrance. Marcus could see military police markings along its side. The second stopped several yards behind it. Knox glanced toward Grant. Dispatch called them. Grant shook his head. The transmission only said installation security was responding to activity near the boundary. Knox looked toward Marcus. Did you call somebody? No. Nobody from the Veterans Center? Not that I know of. Marcus kept his hands relaxed. I did not ask anyone to come. Knox studied him as if searching for some hidden advantage Marcus had been withholding. There was none. Marcus had no secret connection waiting behind the gate, no powerful friend coming to settle the argument, and no intention of turning his military service into leverage. He wanted the same thing he had requested from the beginning: verification. The military police vehicles came to a stop. Doors opened, and Sergeant Rebecca Torres stepped out of the first vehicle with another officer several paces behind her. She did not hurry. Her eyes moved across the scene in sequence. Patrol vehicle, tow truck, Marcus's pickup, faded pavement markings, conflicting signs, then the people standing around them. Knox walked several steps in her direction. We have it handled. Torres stopped near the white line. What do you have? Restricted parking tow. Her gaze moved toward the pickup. Who requested it? I did. From which parcel? Silence returned to the lot. Marcus did not look at Knox. He looked at the line. The question was almost identical to the one he had asked minutes earlier. Knox gestured toward the visitor's side. County parcel. Torres looked toward Grant. Parcel number? Grant raised the tablet. That is what we are trying to verify. Knox turned toward him. We know where it is. Torres crouched slightly to examine the faded marking without touching anything, then stood again and looked toward the signs. Which marker are you using as the jurisdiction boundary? Knox pointed toward the white stripe. That one. Torres followed the line with her eyes until it disappeared beneath repaired asphalt. That is an old pavement marking. It is the boundary. Maybe. Torres looked toward the second military police officer. Pull the installation property map. Knox's expression tightened. We do not need to turn this into a federal issue. Torres remained calm. I am not turning anything into anything. Dispatch received notice of towing activity near an installation boundary. I am identifying where the vehicle is located. Marcus felt the heat against the back of his neck. The moment carried none of the triumph Knox seemed to expect from him. If anything, Marcus felt relief that someone was finally asking the question without treating the question itself as defiance. Torres looked toward him. Is this your vehicle? Yes, ma'am. Were you instructed not to move it? Yes. Did you request military police? No, ma'am. Torres nodded and turned back toward Knox. No recognition crossed her face. No salute, no special treatment, no suggestion that Marcus's past service changed his standing in the lot. That was exactly how Marcus wanted it. The second officer opened a digital property map. Grant stepped closer with his own tablet. For a moment, the two screens glowed beneath the afternoon sun. Torres compared them, then looked toward the faded line again. These layers are not matching. Grant nodded. That is what I found. Knox crossed his arms. Digital maps are imperfect. They are, Torres said. So are old painted lines. The tow operator remained beside his truck. I am not moving anything until somebody gives me the property information. Torres looked toward the pickup, then toward the signs. Good. Knox stared at her. I already authorized the tow. Torres met his eyes without changing her tone. And I am not questioning whether you gave an order. I am determining whether this location falls where you believe it does. Marcus looked again at the faded stripe beneath his truck. Sunlight caught the worn paint, making part of it almost disappear against the asphalt. Lines matter when authority changes at the line, he said quietly. Torres glanced toward him, then back to the maps. Grant enlarged one section on his tablet. The second military police officer did the same. Their screens showed two different boundary overlays meeting near Marcus's parking space. Torres took one slow step toward the truck. Nobody moves the vehicle yet. Knox opened his mouth to respond. Torres pointed toward a small marker beyond the row of spaces. Before anyone decides who controls this parcel, we are going to find out what that marker means. Torres walked toward the small marker beyond the parking row, with Grant following several steps behind while comparing the county map on his tablet. Marcus stayed where he had been instructed, far enough from the pickup that nobody could reasonably claim he was interfering. Knox remained near the truck, watching the military police officers examine the edge of the lot. The tow operator leaned against his vehicle with his paperwork still unfinished. Torres stopped beside the marker and brushed dust from its metal face with the edge of a folded paper. A property identification number became visible. The second military police officer entered it into the installation map. Grant did the same on his county system. Marcus could not see either screen, but he saw Grant's expression change first. His eyebrows lifted slightly, then his eyes moved toward Knox. "Bradley," Grant said. Knox did not answer. "You need to look at this." Knox walked over reluctantly. Grant turned the tablet toward him. The county parcel ends before the marker. Knox studied the display. That layer was already inconsistent. Torres looked at the installation map. "This identifier matches our property record." Knox glanced toward Marcus's pickup. "So where exactly does your boundary run?" Torres enlarged the map. "According to this record, through this section of the parking area." She pointed toward the pavement, not the truck. "But I want the recorded survey reference before I make a final determination." Marcus appreciated the distinction immediately. Torres had evidence pointing in one direction, yet she refused to turn evidence into certainty before checking it. Knox had done the opposite. "How long is that going to take?" Knox asked. "As long as verification takes." The words were simple. Marcus looked down at the faded white stripe. Grant remained focused on his tablet. "There is something else," he said. Knox turned toward him. Grant opened another layer. "The visitor parking designation crosses the old painted line." Knox shook his head. "That does not establish jurisdiction." "No," Grant replied. "But it means the sign Marcus referenced was not obviously wrong either." Marcus heard his first name, but said nothing. Torres looked toward him. "When you parked, which sign were you relying on?" "The visitor parking sign near the resource center." "Did you see the installation restriction sign?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you believe you were outside the restricted section?" Marcus pointed without stepping forward. "The visitor sign appeared to cover this row, and the older white line did not clearly match either sign. I checked both before I went inside." Torres nodded. "Did you move any marker or sign?" "No." "Did anyone at the resource center tell you to park here?" "No. I made the decision myself." Knox gave a short breath. So even he admits he was unsure. Marcus looked at him. "I was unsure enough to check. That is different from pretending I was certain." Grant lowered his eyes for a moment. Torres did not react to the tension. "Uncertainty is exactly why we verify." She turned toward the second military police officer. "Contact installation real property and request the current survey reference for this marker." The officer stepped aside and used the radio. Knox looked toward the tow operator. "We could be standing here over a technicality." The operator shook his head. "Property location is not a technicality on a tow authorization." Marcus watched Knox absorb the answer. Nobody was challenging his profession. Nobody was declaring him dishonest. They were asking him to support one specific decision. That seemed to be what made the moment difficult. Grant approached Knox and lowered his voice, though Marcus could still hear him in the quiet lot. "When I told you the layers did not match, we should have paused." Knox looked at him. "You agreed the map could be wrong." "I said it could be. I did not say we knew it was." Knox's jaw tightened. "Whose side are you on?" Grant's expression changed. "This is not about sides." Marcus looked away toward the flag beyond the fence. The fabric lifted in the warm wind, then settled. Torres's radio sounded. She listened without interrupting. The second officer received a response and walked back toward her holding the digital map. "Real property confirmed the marker number," the officer said. "They are sending the survey coordinates now." Torres nodded. Knox folded his arms. Grant watched the screen. Marcus remained beside the visitor walkway, feeling the entire argument narrow toward a few feet of asphalt. A notification appeared on the military police tablet. Torres opened the incoming record and enlarged the survey diagram. Her eyes moved from the screen to the marker, then toward Marcus's pickup. Grant stepped closer. Knox did the same. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Torres finally raised one hand and pointed across the parking row. "There is the recorded boundary." Marcus followed the direction of her finger. Knox stared at the pavement. The faded white line they had argued about was not where the official survey line appeared to run. Torres kept one finger above the survey diagram, while Grant compared the same location against the county map. The official boundary crossed the parking area several feet away from the faded white stripe Knox had relied upon. Marcus followed the imaginary line across the asphalt until it passed beyond the front of his pickup. His truck was not sitting where Knox had claimed it was. Torres looked toward the property marker, then back to the survey coordinates. The old painted line is not the recorded jurisdiction boundary. Knox stared at the screen. How old is that survey? Current record, Torres said. Verified through installation real property. Grant enlarged his own map. That explains the overlap. The county layer was using a simplified boundary display. Knox looked toward the visitor sign. The restricted parking sign still applies. Torres did not argue. It applies where installation restrictions begin. According to the current survey, this vehicle is outside that boundary. The tow operator folded his paperwork. Then I do not have a valid location for the tow request I received. Knox turned toward him. Hold on. The operator remained calm. I was told county restricted parking. The property information does not support that description. Marcus stood near the walkway without moving toward his truck. Relief came quietly, without the satisfaction he might once have imagined. He had spent nearly half an hour asking for one thing, and now that verification had finally arrived, he did not feel like celebrating another person's mistake. Grant looked at Knox. We should cancel the tow. Knox's face remained tight. We still need to determine whether another parking restriction applies. Then determine it, Marcus said. Everyone looked toward him. Marcus kept his tone level. If I violated a valid rule, tell me what it is. I will deal with it. But it should be the rule that actually applies here. Torres gave a small nod. That is reasonable. She checked the visitor parking designation against the survey. Grant did the same. After several moments, Torres looked toward the resource center. This space falls within the visitor parking area associated with the center. I am not seeing an installation restriction that prohibits the vehicle from being here during operating hours. Grant exhaled softly. Neither am I. Knox said nothing. The tow operator returned his gloves to a compartment on his truck. Marcus finally looked toward his pickup. Sunlight reflected from the windshield, illuminating the small service keepsake on the dashboard. The vehicle had never been the real issue. The issue was how quickly uncertainty had been treated as proof. Torres turned toward Knox. For my report, I need the basis you used when you identified the faded stripe as the jurisdiction boundary. Knox looked at the pavement. That is where I understood the boundary to be. From what source? He hesitated. Prior experience in the lot. Torres waited. Grant lowered his tablet. Knox continued. I have handled parking issues here before. Did you verify the parcel today before requesting the tow? Torres asked. Knox looked toward Grant, then toward Marcus. No. The word was quiet. Nobody reacted. Torres entered a note into her device. Grant spoke next. I told him the map layers were inconsistent before the tow proceeded. Knox turned toward him. Grant did not look away. That is what happened. Marcus could see how difficult the admission was, not because Grant was attacking his partner, but because accuracy sometimes demanded saying something uncomfortable in front of everyone involved. Torres looked toward Marcus. Did you prevent either officer or the tow operator from doing their work? No, ma'am. Did you attempt to move the vehicle after being instructed not to? No. Did you request special consideration because of your veteran status? Marcus shook his head. No. I asked them to verify the boundary. Torres nodded and recorded the answer. Knox looked at Marcus for several seconds. You could have made this easier. Marcus met his eyes. I offered to move the truck when you first said there was a problem. Knox's expression shifted. Marcus continued. You told me I could not. Grant looked down. The tow operator closed the final compartment on his vehicle. Torres stepped away from the survey marker. The tow is canceled. Any separate administrative questions about how the request was handled can be reviewed through the appropriate channels. That review should be based on the records and statements, not assumptions. Marcus appreciated those words more than any apology she could have offered on someone else's behalf. Knox was responsible for his own decisions. Grant was responsible for his. Marcus was responsible for his. Torres looked toward the faded stripe one final time. This marking needs to be corrected before somebody else mistakes it for the boundary. Grant nodded. I will include that in the report. Marcus walked toward his pickup only after Torres told him he was free to do so. When he reached the driver's door, he stopped and looked back at Knox. There was no triumph in his face. Officer, I never needed you to believe me. Knox remained silent. Marcus rested one hand on the door handle. I needed you to check. For the first time since the tow truck arrived, Knox had no answer. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Narralight for more powerful stories that remind us to look beyond appearances, challenge prejudice, and never underestimate the impact of doing what's right. Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage creates the biggest change. Thank you for watching. Remember, the world changes one choice at a time. We'll see you in the next story. 3 weeks later, Marcus Hale returned to the Veterans Resource Center beneath a clear morning sky. He slowed his pickup before entering the parking area, partly from habit and partly because something at the edge of the lot looked different. The old white stripe was gone. Fresh pavement markings now crossed the asphalt in clean, deliberate lines, and 2 new signs identified exactly where visitor parking ended and installation-controlled property began. Marcus pulled into a visitor space, shut off the engine, and remained behind the wheel for a moment. The small service keepsake rested near the dashboard where it had been that afternoon. He looked through the windshield at the new boundary. Nobody seeing it today would have to guess. During the previous 3 weeks, the towing incident had been reviewed through separate channels. Installation officials examined the property records and confirmed that the outdated pavement marking had created unnecessary ambiguity near the shared boundary. The county corrected its mapping reference for the area, while the installation replaced the confusing signs and markings. A separate administrative review examined the decisions made during the attempted tow. It did not treat one person's conduct as representing every officer, department, veteran, or community. It focused on individual actions, the available records, and the sequence documented by the people who had been there. Grant's statement confirmed that he had warned Knox about the conflicting map layers before the tow proceeded. The tow operator's paperwork showed that he had repeatedly requested a clear property location. Torres's report documented the official survey reference that ultimately resolved the jurisdiction question. Marcus provided a short statement describing exactly what he had said and done. He added nothing dramatic because nothing dramatic was necessary. The facts were enough. The review concluded that Knox had ordered the tow without adequately verifying the jurisdictional basis after reasonable doubts had been raised. He received administrative corrective action and additional training involving jurisdiction, towing procedures, and documentation. Grant was reminded that recognizing uncertainty also carried a responsibility to communicate it clearly and early. Marcus read the findings once, folded the letter, and placed it in a kitchen drawer. He had never wanted someone's career destroyed. He wanted the next person standing beside an uncertain line to be treated with more care than he had been. That morning, he stepped from the pickup and walked toward the resource center carrying a folder of workshop materials. Near the entrance, he noticed Grant speaking with another officer beside a county vehicle. Their eyes met. Grant gave a small nod. Marcus returned it. Grant walked over. They fixed the boundary. Marcus glanced toward the fresh paint. I noticed. Grant looked at the new signs. Should have been that clear before. Marcus said nothing for a second. Warm sunlight touched the hood of his truck. Clear signs help, he finally said. So does being willing to check when they are not. Grant lowered his eyes briefly, then nodded. You were right about that. Marcus shook his head gently. That was never the important part. Grant looked at him. Marcus continued toward the entrance. The important part is what happens the next time somebody asks. He left Grant standing beside the walkway and entered the building. An hour later, Marcus returned to the lot. The morning had grown warmer, and sunlight stretched across the asphalt. He placed his folder on the passenger seat and closed the door. Before getting behind the wheel, he looked toward the boundary one final time. The new white line ran straight across the pavement, bright against the dark surface. On one side stood the visitor lot. On the other stood installation property. There was nothing impressive about it. It was only paint. Yet Marcus understood what it represented. Authority needed boundaries, but boundaries were useful only when people respected the difference between knowing and assuming. He started the engine and slowly backed from the space. At the edge of the lot, Marcus stopped for a pedestrian crossing the walkway. Then he turned toward the road. In the rearview mirror, the veteran's center grew smaller behind him. The fresh white line caught the sunlight for a moment before disappearing from view. Marcus drove on without looking back.